Hi, everybody. Welcome to session 7. This one is talking about Mark 6, verse 30 through chapter 8, verse 30. So there's a lot of ground to cover here. A lot of them are Jesus' miracles and the miraculous things that he was doing, feeding the 5,000, walking on water. I think what Francis really emphasizes here is his conversation with the Pharisees after all this stuff had happened. He'd just done this amazing miracle, and their question to him is,
Why don't your disciples wash their hands?
Yeah, why don't they wash their hands?
Never mind that you just made bread and fish
out of nothing
and
yeah, and
walked on
totally
water.
defied laws of nature.
But let's talk about their dirty hands.
This and I think it is comical, but at the same time, I think we can resonate with that because we all get tunnel visioned. And I think what's interesting about when we have the benefit of having the perspective of the book that they didn't have, right? We know how it ends. We know what the point is. We can be really critical of the Pharisees. But what I'm seeing is this is just human nature. We get so focused on one thing rather than seeing all the things that God is doing in that person's life or in that place or in that situation. So I think, it's easy to get hard on them, but I think we also get tunnel visioned and lose perspective of what God is doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What are your thoughts? Did you have other comments about the washing your hands?
Yeah, I just laughed really hard. You're right, and I find even with my kids or Matt, well, why don't you pick up your backpack every day? It's this one thing, why you should know this by now. Why aren't you doing this and this? But I don't notice that
all the things they are doing.
Yes, all the things
right?
that they are doing. And
I'm just going to point out the thing that you're not doing that I want you to do.
Right.
Which is exactly what the Pharisees are doing right here, right? I'm going to point out the one thing that you're not doing that I want you to do. It's not even, and Jesus says that, right? He's like, this is a law you made up. This isn't even something that comes from the law that Moses gave.
Right.
Human nature here.
Yeah, and then he goes on to talk about the Pharisees, why don't they wash their hands? They're dirty and they're going to eat it and they're going to get dirty on the inside. And Jesus is like, well, that's not quite how that works.
Yeah, that wasn't the point.
Yeah.
Of what.
And Mark 7:21 through 23 does this list of all this evil that comes from within, and then he talks about how we're very good at blaming outside sources for our sinful nature and the choices we make, and not taking personal responsibility, and that Jesus came to change us from the inside out.
Yeah, Francis talks about what external things are you blaming your sin on? And obviously there's hardship and there's things that happen to us that cause damage and cause trauma, right? But are they things that you're not letting or allowing Jesus to change your heart because of? And that's what the point is there, is that he has the power to change our heart. It's not going to undo the damage that's been done, but he can change the heart. And that's kind of what he's talking about there in verse 20 and 21, like you were saying. It's just so human nature to point fingers, right? And to say, it's your fault that this happened to me. I mean, we see that in the creations, in the fall of Adam and Eve, right? It's this woman you put here with me. It's like two double blame. I'm blaming God and I'm blaming the woman. But just so natural for us to want to point out what other people have done to us, rather than taking that introspective look and saying, what am I not letting Jesus change in my heart? I was really struck by Jesus saying, do you not understand? I think he was saying it to the Pharisees. You don't get it. And you can tell that Jesus is discouraged and disappointed that, he's here to do something for everybody. And there are people who have their hearts hardened toward it and they don't get it. And, it's like when you do something really loving and then somebody just completely overlooks it and ignores it. It's just like, you don't understand.
Yeah.
And I can just imagine Jesus being disappointed and feeling bad there. Well, this passage kind of ends with Peter's confession to the Messiah. Do you have any thoughts on? So they're there in Caesarea Philippi, and Jesus asks the disciples, "Who do people say that I am?"
Yeah, and Peter's like, "Well, I see it now. I know you're the Messiah." And Jesus is like, "Don't tell anybody."
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of like, oh, I guess it's not time yet. But
Strictly warned them not to tell anyone about it.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think there's another account in Matthew 16 where it's a little more elaborate, the account is, but that like Jesus says, "You've received that from the Father." That hasn't been something that you've figured out on your own. Like the Father revealed that to you. And again, it's that gift of faith that he hadn't done anything to manufacture that on his own, but it was given to him freely.
Yeah.
And I think what comes to my mind, so Pastor Steve and I went to Israel a couple years ago, and we went to Caesarea Philippi, and they showed us the cave where they would make sacrifices, and I think Francis Chan talks about that a little bit. But even the space, like even thousands of years later, it has a weird, eerie feeling to it, because it's this weird cave well in a chasm, and they would throw their sacrifices into it, and sometimes gruesome. So like they would throw child sacrifices into this chasm. They would throw food. They would send all of their sacrifices to appease this god of darkness that they believed dwelled in this cave. This cave was the gates of hell. And so Jesus is standing here saying, not even the gates of hell will prevail over me. I have, like, this is the darkest place in this area. People are worshiping darkness, and I will prevail even over that. You don't even have to fear, because like all of that is nothing compared to who I am. And so I think there's something really amazing about what Jesus is doing there in Caesarea Philippi. And I think that's why it's mentioned by name there, so that people know that the gates of hell have no comparison to Jesus and his authority. And yeah. And again, it just shows that he's more than anything on this earth, and his miracles and defies the laws of nature, and it just goes against every single form of authority that people on earth have manufactured, and he's so far beyond that, right? Isaiah 55, my ways are higher than your ways, and we can't even really understand and fathom his greatness, right? So, but again, that's the free gift, because in order to be able to say that and recognize that doesn't come from us, that comes from God.
Yeah, he's the instigator. He pursues us.
Right. Yeah. I've been thinking about it a little bit too, of like when someone you love gives you a gift, you don't throw that gift away. And like, do we sometimes disregard that gift? We like to judge other people who don't have that and think like, oh, why don't you believe this? But yeah, not to just disregard it, not to undermine it, not to take it for granted, not to throw it away. It's a free gift, and then our response is praise and honor and loving him.